tonight. They know that Santa's on his way. He's loaded lots of toys and goodies on a sleigh, and every mother's child is gonna spy to see if reindeer really know how to fly. And so I'm offering this simple phrase to kids from 1 to 92. Although it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas to you. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost sleeping at your...
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Thousand Oaks City Council and Redevelopment Agency for Tuesday, December 5th, 2006. At this time, we'll call the meeting to order. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm sorry, we've got a presentation this evening, and I'm sorry, I was going to... This evening, we have welcome Weeblo Stenpak 3752 as our color guard and to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Boys, please go.
Will the audience please rise? Scout salute. Those not in uniform, please place your right hand over your heart. Color guard advance. Please recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2, color guard, post the colors. Color guard, honor your colors. 2, color guard dismissed. Audience, please be seated.
Boys, thank you very much for coming down and doing that for us this evening. Thank you. Item 3, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fox is absent at this time. Councilmember Bill De La Pena? Present. Councilmember Irwin? Here. Councilmember Glancy?
Here.
Mayor Gillette?
Here. Item 4, special announcements and requests for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. There being none, Item 5, special presentations. This evening, we have an independent advisory committee report on the Channel Islands Harbor. This came about as a request, or a formal written request, from Ventura County Supervisor John Flynn. Mr. Jerry Knotts, who is a resident of the city of Thousand Oaks, from the Citizens Independent Advisory Committee, CIAC, is here to provide a summary of the recently completed Channel Islands Harbor report. Mr. Knotts, welcome.
Are we on? Mayor Gillette, council members, I'm Jerry Knotts, 261 Fox Ridge Drive, Thousand Oaks, and I'm here tonight to share with you an executive overview of a study and review that we just completed having to do with Channel Islands Harbor. We have a PowerPoint presentation that I hope you're looking at the moment. And you're looking at slide 1, which is the title. Mary, go to 2, please. This voluntary committee was formed by Supervisor Flynn back in October 26, 2005. If you go back in history, you remember what was going on at that time. He called this group together just to do an independent review of the harbor. And that's what we did. And by the way, the supervisor was not involved except for the first 5 minutes of the meeting, and we didn't see him again until August this past year, in 2006, when we finished the report. Okay? This should show you the list of the people on the committee. Bunch of retired folks except for me. I don't consider myself retired. And I'm the only one from the East County, and you'll see why I'm here talking tonight. Go to slide 3, please. The task was not simple, as you can see by this chart. This was our plan of action. First thing we wanted to do is decide how we were going to do it. And we decided we would do it with interviews and research and documents in the county. So we identified 15 key stakeholders involved directly with the harbor, wrote a bunch of questions applicable to those folks, and went out and conducted the interviews. At the same time, we were doing much research. These people were, representatives from the Harbor Foundation, Friends of the Harbor, Harbor Commission, Channel Islands, Beach Community Services District, the lessees, the County Auditor Controller, the Harbor Director, and the Chief Executive. The details and specific interviews of each of these individuals is contained in our final report. After 9 months of effort, the final report was completed. There are 2 volumes. Volume 1 is actually the report. Volume 2 contains copies of the documents we used and referenced in the Volume 1. We had 35 findings and 23 recommendations. Our findings were categorized in 5 areas: harbor management, financial, maintenance, jurisdictional assignments, and economic impacts. Tonight I'm only going to talk about a couple of things in each of the first 3 categories. Slide 4, please. Our observations. By the way, there is a copy of this report in your possession at the time. Anyone else in the community that wants one can get one also. Yes. First of all, we found no coordinated effort on anyone's part dedicated to improving the harbor. The harbor management is weak and needs improvement. That's not an individual, that's a system. For instance, there are many high-cost projects on the books. You can see the county budget. There is no formal internal project management provided. It's all done by consultants. They respond only when requested. No one in the county knows the status of any one project at any one time. Lease management's a problem. Finances are upside down, and I'll show you a chart. This harbor is supposed to be self-supporting and hasn't been for years. On maintenance, harbor properties are a sham. Even the grand jury came with that conclusion. And lastly, of course, the Board of Supervisors just clearly ignoring the harbor. Next slide, please. Harbor management. Let's talk about lease management. There's no common lease for the county. The lease terms and conditions are inconsistent. Some lessees pay fees for extending their leases, others don't. There's no procedure for a top-level management review of the leases prior to signature. And there's no standards for maintenance on any of the properties included in the leases. Next slide, please. Over a short period of time, the county has essentially given away all its rights. I call to your attention the first item on that slide, ANACAPA lease, that existed from 1975 to 2003. Article 5, operating schedule, required harbor director written approval for any changes. On the operating schedule, that also covers controlled prices, it required written approval by the harbor director for any changes. Those prices are the items that you and I pay attention to because it gets out of our wallet when we're visiting the harbor. The new lease, the vintage lease, Article 14.2 on prices sets consideration for rate changes, but there is no requirement for approval. That is, unless it's specifically requested by the harbor director. The even newer lease, 2005, Elmar, same section. No consideration for schedule, rates, or fee changes, and no requirement for approval or notification. The lessees are in full control. In essence, we have no protection for the general public for rate, fee, and schedule changes. Last time I remember it, public funds support that harbor, and there's no one protecting our interests. Next slide, please. The harbor operates under an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund, as you well know, is supposed to be self-sustaining and operated like a business. Review the harbor administration budget as one part of the enterprise fund, which consists of 4 pieces. We're going to talk about the administration budget. As you can see by that chart, expenses continue to exceed revenues. If you're in a business operating like that, welcome to the bankruptcy. By the way, the county auditor controller has no authority or responsibility to audit that harbor or any aspect thereof. The last financial and management audit of the harbor occurred in 1999. Next slide, please. Let's compare apples and apples as best we can. We have 2 harbors in the county, Ventura and Channel Islands. If you look at that chart, you'll see the distinction marked. Those blue bars, vertical bars, indicate that the Ventura Harbor is making in excess of $1 million a year profit. If you look at the other set of bars side by side, you'll notice that Channel Islands is making $30,000 a year. The question is why? Next slide. Maintenance. I invite you to go visit the harbor, see for yourself. This is a representation of various shots around the harbor. If this was a homeowners group, there would be a lot of people in here talking to you about it. No repairs. Next slide. Okay. There are 20,000 boaters in Ventura County. 10% of them live in Thousand Oaks or the vicinity of the city. They have no representation. They're hit now with some very interesting fee increases. The rest of us are denied the benefits of a self-sufficient, well-maintained recreational facility. Our public funds are being used. They shouldn't be used there. It should be an enterprise fund managed properly, making its own way. I ask you to review our final report, support our findings. Please send a letter of support to our supervisor and the whole board of supervisors, requesting timely action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Knauss. Any questions of the speaker? Colonel Knauss, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay. He's not here yet. The city clerk, please open the public comment section.
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. All speakers for public hearings shall be called and heard during the public hearing. Pursuant to council's standards of operation, the mayor may assist any speaker from straying into areas not within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks should be addressed to the council as a whole. Under state law, issues discussed under public comments can have no action unless listed on the agenda and may be referred to the city manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. All documents for city council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. 11 people have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much. Our first speaker this evening will be Richard Coons. Richard Coons, followed by Joshua Esquivel. Coons, please give your name and community of residence. Thank you.
Good evening. Richard Coons, Thousand Oaks. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Thousand Oaks Track and Field Booster Club and the Track and Field program at Thousand Oaks High School. As president of the Thousand Oaks Track and Field Booster Club, I would like to thank the City of Thousand Oaks and this honorable council and staff for their continued support over the years in helping us make this program great. I'd also like to thank all of you for the future consideration of the 2006 and 2007 Community Enhancement Grant. We appreciate your consideration in going over that for us. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Nancy Ariano and the Public Works Department for all their help and patience with coordinating work programs for us and addressing questions from time to time, mostly from me and Ben and Mike Rote and a few others. Our gratitude goes out to the Public Works Department and all of its employees who put in extra time to coordinate and direct our efforts on the work days. Those people were always very, very nice and friendly and good to deal with and pointed us in the right direction on our work days. One more thing while I'm up here, and this is kind of a side note aside from the track and field and the community enhancement. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the City of Thousand Oaks Council, all of its departments and public services for supporting the Every 15 Minutes program that was recently put on at Thousand Oaks High School on November 30th, 2006. As you know, this presentation happens every 2 years, and it involves the efforts of a great many people and businesses, and I understand the city has a big part in supporting that whole enterprise. My son was a participant in that, and my wife and I were as well, and I can tell you that it was a truly life-changing 2 days, and it's something that we really support, and thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Esquivel, followed by Fire Chief Mike LaPlante.
As the student president of the Westside High School Instrumental Music Department, I would like to thank you for the city enhancement grants that you have granted us and your support over the years. With your generous funds, we've been able to buy thousands of dollars worth of new instruments and enable hundreds of students to continue and enhance their passion for music. As a recipient of some of these funds, like in terms of my music, and as a participant of the band, I can have firsthand seen the effects and the generosity of the council, and I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Battalion Chief Mike LaPlante, who serves as the City of Thousand Oaks Fire Chief, and is going to give us an update on the recent fire incident in the Moore Park area. Chief LaPlante.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, Mayor and members of the Council. As you know, the recent Shekel fire in and around Moore Park impacted a large part of the county as well as Thousand Oaks, and I wanted to give you just a brief synopsis of the fire situation there and also Thousand Oaks participation, the fire units from Thousand Oaks, and as well as law enforcement. As you know, the fire started Sunday morning on the 3rd about 2 o'clock. The original fire started about 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday the 3rd. We had actually 2 fires that burned together. The first started just north of Shekel Road and Grimes Canyon Road near the what's come to known as the Egg City facility, if you're familiar with that area, Egg City. It started just north of there. The second fire started at the very north end of Happy Camp Canyon. If you're familiar with the area north of Rustic Canyon Golf Course, it was well to the north of that, about 5 miles away, both of which are just to the north of Moore Park. The cause of both fires is still under investigation. The weather at the time, we had winds at about 35 miles an hour, gusting to 65 to 70, and that was taken by our units there on the ground. So I can attest to the wind speed and the conditions that morning, with humidity easily within single digits. The initial fire moved southwesterly between Stockton and Grimes Road. Initial reports from our Rescue Engine 40 as he arrived on scene indicated 30 acres of fire, and it was growing rapidly. We had actually made some pretty good progress on that fire by sunrise. At about 700 hours or 7 o'clock in the morning, we had a second fire reported 5 miles to the northeast. It moved rapidly down the canyon and impacted Walnut Canyon Road and eventually the city of Moore Park and the Campus Park area. The second fire certainly complicated our issues, presented a larger threat to the homes. Multiple fire units that we had deployed up Happy Camp Canyon were cut off at times and briefly retreated to safety zones while the fire passed through and then went back to work. By 9 o'clock that morning, both fires were well into the homes along Walnut Canyon and Happy Camp Canyon. We consolidated both of the fires under a unified single command. We ran both fires under one command. And the fire continued to impact the Moore Park town site, isolated ranches, and major highways throughout Sunday and into Monday morning. Eventually, the fire moved north as well into the Santa Clara Valley, along over the top of Grimes Canyon, burning down to Giberson Road. Units contained the fire east of Highway 23 around Elkins Ranch Golf Course. We had excellent coordination between both fire and law enforcement units. Law was represented by the County Sheriff's Department as well as CHP, and also we had great coordination with Caltrans for road closures, evacuations. Red Cross helped a lot with the human evacuations and sheltering, and then the County Animal Control coordinated with large animal sheltering as we evacuated animals out of the area. We received mutual aid from CDF, other fire agencies throughout Southern California, to include San Luis Obispo and Orange counties. At the height of the firefight, we had about 1,700 emergency services personnel assigned, and they were working out of a command post at the Arroyo Vista Park and Moore Park. As far as the Thousand Oaks contingent that went to the fire, we sent a battalion chief along with 5 engines from Thousand Oaks were dispatched throughout the morning. But all were quickly recovered by other district units, and the oncoming shift at 8 o'clock we changed shifts, and that shift came in and covered our stations. The department, while had been in a Plan 1 for staffing, it went to a Plan 3, which greatly increased our staffing and allowed stations to be more easily covered. And eventually 3 additional engines were sent from Thousand Oaks, but only after those stations were adequately covered did we staff the other 3 engines. At this time, most, if not all, of the units from Thousand Oaks have returned and are back in quarters. And I did bring along the most recent incident map, which indicates the fire had grown to about 13,000 acres, and it impacted those areas of unincorporated areas of the county as well as the city of Moore Park. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to come here. Just highlights the fact that our fire season never seems to end. I would encourage our citizens to make sure that their homes are hardened for fires like this if they live near the brush, and that they stay vigilant. And again, I'd like to thank the Sheriff's Department as well as other fire agencies for helping us out so much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Chief. Any questions of Chief LaPlante? Mrs. Builder-LaPena.
Good evening. By when will the fire be completely contained? It was expected to be sometime tonight?
I think it'll be contained this evening, although we'll probably have fire units on scene throughout the week. In that area, if you're familiar with it, there are eucalyptus hedgerows, compost piles, and things like that, so those will continue to burn for some time, and we expect dry weather at least through Friday. So we'll probably have units patrolling the area through Friday.
And I understand there has only been one minor injury. Is that correct, or have there been others?
You know, the only injury I'm aware of did occur to a CDF firefighter. They, early morning of Sunday, they rolled over in their fire engine, drove off the road in the smoke. Thank goodness it was a slow roll. Of course, to them, it probably took 15 minutes for that to complete. But once they ended up stopping, they were able to all crawl out of the engine with the one hand injury to one firefighter, but they redeployed to other fire engines and went back to work. And the major accident investigation team is taking a look at the accident itself.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Chief LaPlante, I understand that one of the evacuation centers in Thousand Oaks was opened and used. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We had 2 shelters open, I believe, Simi Valley or Moore Park, and then in Thousand Oaks.
Okay, that's the one next to Thousand Oaks High School Community Center?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Irwin? Oh. Additional questions? Chief LaPlante, just Mr. Mitnick?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, to add a little bit to Mike's comments, the city of Thousand Oaks, as a municipal government, was also on standby and in the ready mode, and public works staff started to gear up as they normally do should the winds have changed and the fire have come this way. Water tanks were topped off to the extent possible, and we're always in the ready mode to work with the fire department and the police department by way of backup use of our equipment, rolling stock, barricades, that type of thing. Luckily, we didn't have to tap into any of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again, Chief LaPlante. Next we get Nancy Davis, followed by Bill Gideon.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Davis. I live in Thousand Oaks. I am the booster president for the Westlake High School Instrumental Music Department. On behalf of the Westlake High School Instrumental Music Boosters, I would like to say thank you for your generous financial support in the past and for your ongoing commitment to the youth in this city. As an organization, we work very hard to raise the necessary money to fund this worthwhile but very expensive educational program. The community enhancement grants that we've received in the past from the City of Thousand Oaks have helped us maintain the high standard of excellence of instructors, materials, and instruments for these very talented and hardworking young people. We greatly appreciate your consideration of our application for the 2007 City Enhancement Grant, and we look forward to your favorable decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Gideon? I have both a speaker card and a comment card, Ms. Gideon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Thousand Oaks City Council. My name is Bill Gideon. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks, and I'm also the president of the Thousand Oaks High School Wrestling Team Booster Club. I'm here tonight on behalf of Coach Line and the entire Thousand Oaks High School Wrestling Team and staff. We all would like to take this moment to thank you for considering us as you award your community enhancement grants. We realize that a great number of applications come in every year, and we are very grateful you have selected ours as one of the ones you will look at and consider. If selected, we will use these funds If selected, we will use these funds to forward an already successful and proud program. Wrestling does not have the huge crowds, so we depend on fundraising to supply our athletes with the gear and supplies needed to keep our program at the top. As these athletes travel to other cities for competitions, be assured that they wear the name Thousand Oaks on their uniforms with great pride and dignity. It is programs like the Community Enhancement Grants that make Thousand Oaks the greatest place to raise a family. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Abraham, followed by Carol Neerman.
Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, my name is Mike Abraham, and I'm a 26-year resident of the City of Thousand Oaks. I am the committee chair for Boy Scout Troop 716 that meets at the United Methodist Church in Thousand Oaks. We've been chartered for approximately 42 years continuously. We have submitted a application for a community enhancement grant. This is our second year in doing so, although last year our paperwork was not complete. I'd like to thank Nancy Arrieta for her help and patience in helping us properly complete an application this year. It's my understanding that these applications have been forwarded to the City Council for their review and for their final disposition. I want to thank the Council for providing this program, and I sincerely hope that the City Council will find both of these groups worthy of approvals. Thank you much, and happy holidays.
Thank you very much. Carol Neerman, followed by Randy Short.
Good evening. My name is Carol Neerman, and I live in Thousand Oaks. I'm the president of Los Flores Community Garden, and I'd like to thank the City Council for considering us as a recipient for the Community Enhancement Grant this year, and to also thank you for your past support in previous years. If you hadn't supported us, we probably wouldn't be here anymore, and we do some valuable community work, so we're very happy that we've received your support in the past. We'd also like to thank Nancy Arrieta, who's been really patient in showing us the ropes on how to get our paperwork in, and also City employee Stan Hakes, who assisted us in the last year with our composting workshops. And just a little bit of information for those of you who don't know a lot about the garden. We are a community garden, and we do have residents who have plots and can grow vegetables. This year, our gardeners have raised and donated over $1,000 of produce to MANA, the local community food bank. And we've also distributed fresh vegetables to senior centers in the area. We hosted a speaker, people speaking on composting and on organic gardening. And we've also been able to keep probably dozens of truckloads of mulch and probably about 30 bales of straw and a few trunkloads of manure out of the landfill and the use of our garden. And I'd also like to thank our other partners. We are located on the CRP, Caneo Park and Rec District land in Waverly Park, conveniently located next to the Equestrian Center. And we also have received assistance in material assistance with materials and supplies from Seeds of Change, Do It Center in Thousand Oaks, and also Peach Hill Soils. They've had a little bit of a difficulty this week, so we'd really especially like to thank them for their support. And also, we've received volunteer assistance from the Girl Scout Troop 1065, and also from the Rotary Club at the high school at Moore Park College. So thank you very much for considering us.
Thank you. Randy Short, followed by Mary Harris.
Good evening. My name is Randy Short. I reside in Channel Islands Harbor, and I'm here on behalf of the Friends of Channel Islands Harbor. The Friends of Channel Islands Harbor are made up of businesses and supporters of Channel Islands Harbor, and I wanted to come to let you know that we're excited about the public-private partnership that is now in place in Channel Islands Harbor. It has been created, this public-private partnership has been created by a positive, supportive relationship with 4 out of 5 supervisors. My company operates in harbors throughout California, and contrary to what you have heard from the speaker in the report, which, by the way, was only the committee that was formed by only one supervisor, carefully selected members, and whose staff worked with the committee, even though the supervisor did not. I'm here to say that Channel Islands Harbor, out of all the harbors that we work with throughout California, Channel Islands Harbor is one of the bright, shining examples of what can be done when the public and private sector come together. Just as an aside, I was shocked to hear the comparison between Channel Islands Harbor being negative and Ventura Harbor being positive. Our company operates in both harbors. I think that the speaker had to have mixed up the two, since Ventura Harbor is only just recently coming out of Chapter 9 bankruptcy. So I think that you should carefully, if you're considering this report, you should carefully look at the facts presented. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Mary Harris.
I'm right over here.
Mary, followed by Nick Kidwai.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I only want to make one comment. As far as this Channel Islands thing, I've been reading the papers with my own opinion. Mayor and Council, I don't think we should be getting involved in something that's a county issue, not a city issue. I've been reading the paper where now the DA is getting involved. I understand this has been a fight for so long, but I really don't think the county should be bringing the city into this. I think the city should stay out of this, let the county fight it out, let the DA decide what he's going to do. I mean, I don't live at the harbor, but I'm saying this has just been an ongoing argument. I think the county should let this stay at the county, let the county handle it, and whatever comes out of it, it'll be up to the Board of Supervisors and the DA to decide. I don't think the city should even get involved in something like that. So I just want to voice my opinion that I don't like what's happening with this, but I don't think the city should step into something that's, like I say, been a county issue. I think we need to stay out of it and stay clear, because then when the city gets involved, then we start figuring we can just stamp on things that really we have no control of, because it is in the county and it should be kept there. So I just want to say that I'm opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nick Kidwai, followed by Ashley Cooper.
I begin in the name of God, who is most beneficial, most merciful. Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newberry Park, and Dr. Glancy, could you believe, still Director, Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks. It is unbelievable, Council people, how low this body can get. I can only wish that we had a body that we, the citizens, could really be truly proud of, because of both the actions of high-level staff and council members. When staff is not able to show the council and council committee's agenda on the front page and is more interested in being all things to all people, nothing gets done. Well, for example, this meeting is out of routine, and council used to meet consecutively, but we are meeting 3 weeks in a row, and we used to meet every week when this blob was built. Last week, I sent a request showing that the Planning Commission meeting was shown on the start page in error, and council meeting was not shown till Tuesday morning. I asked that my facts be put in the green packet, as I sent in opposition to the request by a council member to dedicate an oak tree for the wonderful performance of the former assistant manager. What happened amazes even me. It is sad thing that no one on the dais speaks up. My 2 pages were put in council mail, I guess. It was never put in the supplemental packet. While I addressed the issue of the unfair political campaign signs, I never talked about this issue in public comments, yet the city manager responded to it from out of the blue and addressed the concerns superficially, saying that all the meetings are posted on the web. Yet the faxes were in front of the council people, I understand, and not a single council member had the courage or the decency or just doing their job to ask why this is not being done. In fact, in the last week, there was an important meeting of the Traffic Commission, and that was never put on the agenda, and some citizens have come to me and said that they did not even know that the meeting was taking place. In fact, the city manager had asked a young staff member to talk to me, and I did talk to her, and even to this moment, there's the gap between citizens and the government and bureaucrats. They don't understand what difference it makes, because this meeting was also not put on the council's page, on the start page for the website till this morning. And I don't know how many people would have possibly seen it and decided to come over here and maybe wish happy holidays to the esteemed council members. If staff and council is not willing to recognize the problem exists, how can we rectify it? A month ago, many citizens came over here and complained about parking on their streets, and that issue has been brushed aside. You should really, even if it is solved, bring it before the council like you had promised.
Ashley Cooper, followed by Kathleen Caden Phipps. I'm sorry, Kathleen and Caden Phipps.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Ashley Cooper. I reside in Moore Park, so before I begin, I want to thank the fire chief and all of the firefighters from all over Southern California who came and helped in Moore Park. We've seen their fire engines day and night for the last couple days, and we appreciate all their efforts. I am here tonight to talk about our Link Crew program at Thousand Oaks High School. It is our freshman transition program where we take juniors and senior students, train them during the summertime to put on a orientation day with tours and question answer sessions, icebreaker, things like that to best prepare our ninth graders for our freshman year at Thousand Oaks High School. In addition to our freshman orientation program, we've also included lunchtime activities, after school activities, trying to get the students involved in positive activities on our campus. This year we've also put in or implemented a tutoring program at lunch where we get our very successful juniors and seniors to come into 2 of our classrooms and tutor our ninth graders in all subjects, and we found that it's been very, very successful. Again, the reason that I'm here tonight is that we did apply for one of the community enhancement grants, and through the help of Nancy Arrieta, we were able to gain the committee or the review committee support, and I just hope that you do go through and approve the Thousand Oaks High School Link Crew grant, where we can go and use those funds to help. We have over 600 freshmen, as well as our juniors and seniors who benefit from their leadership positions. So when you meet, please consider us at Thousand Oaks High School Link Crew program. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen and Caden Phipps.
Good evening. Nice to see many of you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Kathleen Mallory Phipps, and I wanted to thank you this evening. I'm not used to doing this. I'm usually on the other side, so no wonder the public gets nervous.
Please, just relax
so
and just let us know what you...
My name is Kathleen Mallory Phipps, and I reside at 66 Sandra Court. I'm here representing Maple Elementary School. I'm the community fundraising board person on the PFA board at Maple. And we want to thank Nancy Arrieta. She's always been very patient with us. Thank you so much. She's received so many accolades this evening, and she really does deserve that. We also wanted to thank the council for this program. I'm here thanking you for your consideration of the Community Enhancement Grant. Maple Elementary School is seeing, like many elementary schools, is seeing a significant decline in the funding from the state on our school programs, and some of the really good programs are being omitted because we just don't have the money for it. So we thank you for your consideration of Maple Elementary for your Community Enhancement Grant, and we look forward to a favorable consideration this evening, we hope. And my son, Caden Phipps, wanted to say something as well.
Thank you for your consideration. My school could really use the money.
Caden, thank you very much for coming down and talking to us this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you. Okay?
Thank you so much.
That concludes our public comment section. Item 7, consent calendar. I have 2 cards on 3 separate items. I have 1 speaker on 7E and another speaker on 7C and G. Pleasure of the council. Mrs. Bel de la Pena.
I have a question for about item 7D.
D as in David.
Thank you.
Okay, I have, well, why don't I call speakers on these other couple of items and deal with those first. So the first one is on item 7E, Mary Harris. Mary?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here in support of item 7E, which is the 2-year extension of our Dial-A-Ride program. And I want to thank both Lee and Greg for being here. I just want to bring the three concerns that I gave to Greg, and that is with the support of our 2-year extension. I'd like to eventually see better improvements, more efficiency as far as dispatching, the way our program is working. Two, that we hopefully will get more vehicles aboard. I know we have, vehicles now, but we're going to need more with the service being such a demand. And then the 45-minute wait periods, also I'd like to see those come down, because usually 45-minute wait periods is quite a long time when you think about it. It's 45 minutes either way, going or coming. So I did give my concerns to the head manager here, and I have talked to Lee, but I wanted to bring it to the council's attention. This is a very good program for seniors and disabled, but like I say, we just need you to be in support of either getting more vehicles aboard so the service can be even better during a 2-year extension. And we also need the wait times to come down. But I certainly do support the 2-year extension, and I'd like to see real good improvements as our 2-year extension comes aboard. So I do ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Items 7C and 7G, Nick Kidwai. You want to take those one at a time? C first.
If you would allow me, I just want to say 30 seconds for A. I have talked about minutes before, and the solution that staff has come with, a 3-ring binder, is not really completely appropriate. Also, since you're not showing your draft minutes, and the minutes are basically still very hollow, and they really don't reflect what happens here. I would ask that City Council readdress the issue of the minutes. Number C, as a member on the Residents' Roundtable and being in other committees, I have spoken about this with no bite from the council, where Mr. Masri had changed that no citizen can be on more than one committee. And this is the time when you're starting your recruiting efforts and all that. I implore the council to open this up, and the debate should be whether people should be allowed to serve on 2, 3, or 5 committees. Choose a number, but one is just too restrictive. If you look at the records, meetings start late because we cannot meet quorums, meetings are cancelled, and the reason is that there's only a certain amount of people that are willing to work on these committees and give off their time. And number G is basically what, in my humble opinion, does not belong in the consent calendar, because the consent calendar on page 2 says matters listed are considered routine and will be approved by one motion. There should be no separate discussion. And that's what completely amazes me. I mean, we just went through an election. We again had this stupid focus on slow growth. But when these are the real issues, I mean, taxpayers are being screwed right and left. I mean, if you look at the founding fathers of this nation, I mean, I'm an immigrant, and a lot of other people take this seriously. Taxpayers' funds should be analyzed and looked at carefully. This is $75,000 that you are purchasing, spending on a human resources and employment application thing. I mean, what the hell is this? What is this for? I mean, who has come up with the requirement that you have to have something like this? Do our wonderful neighboring cities like Agora and Westlake have to have it? Maybe they are exempt because they are too small. Maybe you should fight. Somebody should fight, and maybe you can use it at one of the employment agencies. I mean, I don't know whatever it is, and that's the whole thing. These things are routinely, every council meeting, put in the consent calendar, and nobody on the council wants to take the time to ask staff the tough questions. I know maybe some of the council people do talk, spend the time, and maybe you do it offline. But some of us would like to know as what is happening. $75,000 is not peanuts. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Item 7D, Ms. Bildale-Opinion.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. I always think it's wonderful when we try to tap sources of renewable energy. And I was wondering regarding this particular system, the photovoltaics power system, have we analyzed, or are we going to analyze also the cost of maintenance versus what we are getting out of it?
Sure. All we're asking City Council to do at this point is allow us to apply for the grants. And then once we have those grants, we can do the full analysis to determine whether it makes financial sense for us or not. The agreements we entered into at Hill Canyon were full service agreements. And so the vendor installs them, owns them, and operates them. So they do full maintenance, and all we did was negotiate a kilowatt hour price with them rather than with Edison. So in that case, the cost included everything. It includes installation, maintenance, and operations. So we can look at the same thing here. It might be where we end up owning these. What this allows us to do is apply for the grants. So once we have those grants, then we know how much it's going to be subsidized, and we can determine whether it makes sense for us.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know. Appreciate it.
Okay. Pleasure of the council with the consent calendar. Mrs. Irwin?
Yeah, I'll move the consent calendar.
I have a motion for move. Comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 8A, public hearing. Would the clerk please open the public hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8A, Residential Development Control System, assignment of point ratings and supplemental award of development allotments for 2006. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the City Clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. I have one card on this item, and the speaker will be allowed 5 minutes.
Thank you. Opening staff report, Mr. Prescott. Good evening, Mr. Prescott.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We do have a PowerPoint. Tonight is a supplemental development allotment award hearing. You had an earlier hearing during the summer. The purpose of this evening's hearing is to assign the project point ratings and consider award of allotments to a project which had not yet been approved on its merits by the Planning Commission at the time you awarded the 2006 allotments earlier this year. The process we're in tonight is required by the city's residential development control system, otherwise known as Measure A. The subject property was approved by the Planning Commission in July. There was an appeal related to one condition, which was adjudicated by the council in September. So the project is approved and is eligible to compete for allotments. And that project is the Centex Ventu Park Road project, consisting of 82 single-family homes. 69 townhomes and 13 single-family residences. Total of 82 allotments requested. And at this point, we have 101 allotments available in the 2006 development allotment cycle. The recommendation by staff and the Planning Commission, which sat as the Residential Development Evaluation Board and assigned the project point ratings, is for the City Council to assign those same point ratings to the project and award the 82 allotments as set forth in our report. And I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Questions of Mr. Prescott? Mrs. Builder-LaPena?
Thank you. I have a question regarding this particular project, DA 2004-01. And please correct me if I'm wrong. It is my understanding that it is not Centex Home anymore, but someone else who will be building these units. And if so, is it possible that the new builder may modify what was originally being approved for Centex?
Centex Homes is no longer involved with that project. At this point in time, there is another builder that's interested in buying the property and or taking over Centex's position and developing the project as approved by the Planning Commission. Any change to the project would require a filing of a modification application. The entitlement runs with the land irrespective of who the builder is.
And is it also irrespective of what the new owner or builder may want to build once he or she files a modification? Should they file a modification? They may not, for all I know. Would we have to change the allotment, is what I'm asking.
That's a good question, and if the project if it were changed, if that proposal did reduce the number of points the project was allowed then, or was awarded, then that modification would have to include a change to the point rating as well. Typically, though, when projects change hands, usually there are not significant changes to the project that affect the point rating. But if such a change is proposed, that would have to be considered.
And if the change, hypothetically speaking, were to be actually fewer units, would that impact what we are approving tonight?
No, it would not.
Thank you.
Mrs. Irwin?
Those were the same questions I had.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Any additional questions? We have any additional comment, Mr. Prescott? We have one speaker on item 8A, Mr. Nick Kidwai. Mr. Kidwai? The city clerk, speaker time, 5 minutes. Mr. Kidwai.
I can guarantee I will not take that much time. Nick Kidwai, Director Concerned Citizens, Thousand Oaks, and speaking against this development board for a dozen plus years. Same reasons Dr. Glancy, Mr. Fox, other people have in the past nodded their head and agreed with me that the time for this board has come and gone a long time ago. But again, I mean, the thing that, I don't know what's the opposite of distinguish, I mean, that is the hallmark of this body seems to be, is not to do anything about important things. Everybody in the days in this room is for helping first-time home buyers, helping our kids, having low-income housing. But when you need action to reduce the cost of housing, I mean, it gets me so upset. Even right now, I have a colleague who lives in Orange County from Ecuador, that's going to Ecuador, and after that he's moving to Texas because he cannot afford to live in Orange County. I mean, this board, I mean, I'm glad that I think some people have come here, maybe representing the applicant. I tried to have one of the able attorneys represent a business in Camarillo recently, and he wanted $10,000 for coming to a planning commission hearing. And the developer, I mean, I know some people consider these big bad developers to be like wolves or I don't know what, right, that they're making so much money and sock it to them. Sure, maybe 20% of the cost of going through the rigmarole comes out of the pocket of the developer. But the vast majority of that money comes from the cost of the housing. That's one of the reasons our cost of housing in Southern California and specifically in Thousand Oaks is so high. So I would implore the council to ask in January, to ask that this thing be turned down. In fact, one council member about 5 years ago upped the limit from 250 to 500, even though there was absolutely no reason for it, and that was basically a political move because then he was able to talk about it during the campaign that, you know, I'm slow growth, I'm the true slow growth champion, and I'm protecting you, the homeowners, by reduced it from 500 to 250. I don't know. Whatever it is, I mean, you know, generally I read all the staff reports, but I will be very frank and say I did not even bother to open this staff report because, I mean, it's just a waste of time. But at least I have the liberty of being able to do that. The people who have these small projects that are coming over here, they have to go through the ropes. I asked, in fact, I mean, I don't know when you are going to be able to provide a bigger screen so that these PowerPoint presentations could be seen. I have discovered, unbelievable, Mr. Mayor, but There is free wireless internet in this chamber. And so I watched the PowerPoint presentation on this thing. There's a little bit of a time delay. I hope that you will not put a code on it and let the citizens be able to use it and be more involved. In a way, the internet is supposed to be free. I know some people want to make money selling it, and maybe we can come up with something which is reasonable so that we can use the technology to our benefit. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Any additional questions of staff? Staff response of any type? There being none at this time, I'm sorry, Mrs. Owen?
I know I asked you this last time, but of course, this is a silly exercise. When are we done with this development allotments?
The ordinance is scheduled to sunset at the end of next year.
So it's one more time through?
At least one.
Thank you.
Any additional questions of staff? There being none, at this time I'll close the public hearing, council discussion, and a motion. Mrs. Owen?
I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation to assign project point ratings for the Centex project.
Staff recommendations, both 1 and 2?
Yes.
Thank you. Comments to the motion? There being no comments, please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 9D, department reports. Approval of purchase, exchange, and sale agreements. Mark Watkins, Public Works Director. Mr. Watkins, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Gillette, members of the City Council. Next item before you is the approval of the purchase, exchange, and sale agreements and the joint escrow instructions with the city, the Conejo Valley Unified School District, Conejo Recreation and Park District, and Chappelle Industries. The agreements that are presented before you are consistent with the MOU that the city entered into in May of this year. Just kind of a quick background and reminder, this parcel that the city is acquiring is immediately to the south of the city's municipal service center. The parcel to the northwest of the city's municipal service center is currently owned by the Conejo Valley Unified School District. That parcel has a number of deed restrictions on it, and those restrictions include a reversionary clause that if that property was used for anything other than a school purpose, it would revert back to city ownership. And then it's got another restriction on it that if that parcel was used for anything other than a school purpose, there would be a fee that has to be paid to the Conejo Recreation and Park District equal to roughly half the value of that parcel. The agreement that was worked out and it was approved in the MOU back in May has the city purchasing parcel number 2 from Chappelle for $3.918 million. Chappelle owns lot number 11 at about $2.5 million. The deed restrictions are then revert back to the city, which can make those deed restrictions go away as the owner. And then the park fee is paid in reduced amounts by all those, by the CRPD, school district, the city, and Chappelle. Ultimately, what happens is that the city ends up with the lot that it desires to the south of the service center. Chappelle ends up with the parcel that's currently owned by the Conejo Valley Unified School District. And both CRPD and the school district end up with cash to pursue some of their programs. This all happens through the joint escrow so that the money all goes into the escrow, so the city still pays the amount that it should be paying for Lot 2. I should note that in the green packet is a revised agreement. There have been very minor changes. The escrow date in the agreement that's in the published council package had a November 30th close. It's now February 28th. I think other minor changes within that approved agreement. But with that, we recommend approval of the agreement in accordance with the MOU and are more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Questions of staff? Ms. Spildale, opinion?
Thank you. Mr. Watkins, I was wondering why the school was never built. Do you have an answer to that?
Mr. Mitnick seems like he would like to answer that question.
Mr. Mitnick?
I believe this is at the end of the Rancho Canal Road, that it was determined that it was not an appropriate site for a continuation high school given to its remoteness, proximity to industrial users, and immediate adjacency to the natural gas pumps and facilities. And also the school district wanted to find a more suitable location.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional questions of Mr. Watkins? There being none, pleasure of the council. Mrs. Irwin?
I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
Staff recommendations 1, 2, and 3. Thank you. Comments to the motion? Mr. Fox.
Very briefly, we moved through this pretty quickly, and we appreciate the staff report, but I don't want this to go without some comment. Staff did a really great job on this. This is going to serve us in the future, allow us certainly to expand our municipal services if we need to, and I think there's a plan to do that. It makes sense for all the parties, and staff did a good job in working with Chappelle and the school district. They need to be acknowledged. So good job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. Additional comments? Mrs. Irwin, maker of the motion, final comment? Okay. Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Nine B, status report, city's housing element update. Jeff Spector, senior planner. Good evening, Mr. Spector.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'll call this PowerPoint up for you tonight. This is a status report on the general plan housing element update, which involves the regional housing needs assessment. And the purpose of the report is to update the council about these critical long-range planning issues, the housing element update and the regional housing needs assessment. As most of you know, state law requires that general plans have housing elements, and those housing elements must be updated periodically. And cities and counties within the SCAG region, which is Ventura, LA, Orange, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Imperial counties, and Ventura, must actually update their housing elements by June 30th of 2008. And each of these housing elements must accommodate a particular share of what is determined to be the statewide need for housing, and the period begins in mid-2005 through 2014. It's important to note that the law does not require the city to actually build these housing units, but it does require that the city have regulations and policies, general plan and zoning designations to accommodate that housing, that allow the housing to be built. The process of identifying the required number of housing units that must be accommodated is called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. The state agency that begins this is the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and they allocate a share of the statewide need to each region, our region being the Southern California Association of Governments region, and that's SCAG. SCAG allocates the regional share among the counties and cities within the region. And we recently received a proposed allocation from SCAG, and this table displays the allocation for selected cities. And as you can see, the allocation, the number of housing units assigned to Thousand Oaks is far lower than the allocations assigned to some of the other cities. recognizing that, the Ventura Council of Governments, VCOG, met on November 9th of this year, and they discussed the RENA allocation matter. And they chose, the VCOG chose to form a subcommittee to look at alternatives for allocating that housing number, the RENA number, among the various cities and the county. And the VCOG met a few days, maybe a week later, and they developed an alternative. This alternative actually would allocate these housing numbers in proportion to the number of houses that exist within each city. And this, for selected cities, this table displays how that would work. And as you can see, the allocation for Thousand Oaks would change dramatically if that was the methodology used. It would go from a little more than 1,000 units during that planning period to over 5,000 units. So that number, 5,400, the problem is that that far exceeds the remaining ability of our general plan to accommodate these this number of houses. And in order to do so, a general plan amendment would be needed. And that general plan amendment would likely require approval by a vote of the people under Measure E. We've been working diligently towards addressing this issue since we found out what the allocation was and what problems may be lurking. And November 30th, we sent a letter to SCAG and other VCOG member cities in the county taking issue with the allocation methodology. That same day, the Ventura County Community Development Directors held a meeting in which we agreed to develop alternative allocation options, and they would be based on general plan build-out, growth projections, and the amount of developable vacant land within each jurisdiction. There'll be a meeting tomorrow, December 6th, of the Ventura County City Managers and the County CEO to discuss this issue. And the Ventura County Community Development Directors will be meeting on December 12th, and the VCOG will meet again, once again, in a special meeting on December 14th. As far as the path ahead of us in dealing with this, in 2007, we know that we recently received notification that SCAG will be holding a public hearing on the methodology that they are proposing to allocate this RENA. And sometime thereafter, we don't know how long exactly, SCAG will issue its official draft RENA allocation plan. Once that plan is issued, cities and counties may request revisions and or appeal the allocations. Now, the appeal can only be based on certain factors that are outlined in state law. And SCAG is required under state law to hold public hearings in the downtown offices of SCAG, I'm sure, on those appeals. And then SCAG is required to hold a public hearing where it identifies its final decision on the RENA allocation, and then SCAG will present those to all of the local jurisdictions. So that is the process that we're dealing with, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Spector. Questions? I'm sorry. Dr. Glenson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Either for Mr. Spector or Mr. Prescott, are you aware of any previous occasion where VCOG has had formed a little ad hoc committee and and come up with some fairly bizarre numbers.
I'm not aware of that at all, but I haven't been here very long, so perhaps I'll defer to John.
I'm not aware of it, but our department doesn't work directly with VCOM very often, but it does seem unusual.
Thank you very much. I realize the numbers have been with us for some time, but that really wasn't what the essence of the question was. It was just whether this has happened before. Thank you very much. Appreciate your answer.
Mrs. Irwin?
Yeah, it really seems to me a ludicrous methodology to talk about distributing the numbers proportional to the number of homes in each city. And again, we should emphasize that I think it's really terrible that the state is trying to thrust these numbers down our throat. One of the things that was written in the staff report is that you assume that the reallocation numbers were based on trying to emphasize housing growth along transportation stations. And when I look at what the community development directors agreed to, they were talking about the allocations based on general plan build-out, growth projections, and developable vacant land. Doesn't it make sense also to look at the fact that Thousand Oaks doesn't have these transportation centers?
I think it does make sense.
So will the community development directors be looking at that?
Well, the directors were just trying to come up with alternative ways of allocating the numbers, and there are many other ways to allocate the number. That's certainly something that could be discussed, but I know what some of the other cities' feelings about that happen to be, that they'd rather not use that.
Well, because, of course, they do have train stations. But so what is the process for, when are the community development directors going to come up with some sort of process for determining what their recommended RANA numbers are?
Well, we'll certainly try to put it together before the upcoming meeting on December 12th, but it depends on the cooperation of staff from all the jurisdictions in trying to come up with the options. Hopefully we'll have something before the 12th.
And are they starting to look at, I know when I was at the last meeting, everybody was saying that they were at build-out. Are they really going to start looking at if they are, how close they are to their general plan build-out? Has that process started?
That was the agreement, that each jurisdiction, staff from each jurisdiction would do that analysis and provide it to a centralized person who would gather that information, collect the information.
Okay, well, again, I think we really have to fight this because this is extremely significant that we're looking at build-out of Thousand Oaks at 1,500 units, and all of a sudden having to absorb all the extra houses is very disturbing, and it will be very disturbing to our residents, too, that they thought they were protected by Measure E. What happens if we have to have an election and the residents vote down any additional housing?
Well, that's a good question. Perhaps the city attorney can answer that. It's complicated.
I'm sorry, could you tell me what the question was again? I missed part of it. Sorry.
We're going to be forced to take an additional 3,000 housing units that we have not planned for. This would have to go for a vote. And what happens if the residents turn this down?
Well, one of the things, just so we're all clear, we haven't gotten what our real RANA numbers are yet. So hopefully we won't be looking at that many more. If it comes down to, there is a whole process for us to go through an appeal process, and that's something that the council could consider once we find out what our RANA numbers are going to be and we'd come back. If it ends up that we lose whatever appeal and say our numbers are 3,000 units, then in the time frame through 2008, when we work on our housing element, we're going to put together a program to try to come up with ways to accommodate that many units. And so it's almost premature to say what might happen. We may be able to look at different avenues on how we may be able to accommodate units. Obviously, 3,000 would be really a stretch, and there may be recommendations that there'd be certain rezoning which would lead to maybe new land use designations that might have to lead to a Measure E vote. But those are, I want to be cautious about speculating what could happen. The one thing to keep in mind, unfortunately, is under the state statutes, they don't care about self-imposed measures such as Measure E. That's not a criteria that they look at in judging whether you can accommodate a certain number of housing units or not. So it's something we're going to have to deal with, and there's a lot of special rules involved in your housing element and certification of it and what happens if it's not. But so much of that is premature at this point because we don't know what the numbers are, and we won't have a good idea until we have them how we may or may not be able to accommodate that. And so that's something that we're going to be working on in the next 2 years.
Go ahead, Mrs. Serwin.
Is there, it seems to me still one of the more simple solutions is that Ventura County fights to lower its allocations. Are we still focusing on that as a group?
It's certainly still an option in our toolbox.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitnick, you look like you're eager to comment.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, on this issue, as Mr. Spector mentioned, the city managers are meeting tomorrow, and we have a good turnout. At least 9 city managers and the county CEO. We're going to meet and talk about this process from a policy standpoint. And yes, indeed, the aggregate number of units assigned to Ventura County at $28,000, that will be discussed. And we'll also discuss, as mentioned, a more equitable allocation. And we're going to talk about getting some of the cities in the county to acknowledge their actual capacity. We've heard a lot about smart growth, and some of the cities in the West County are very receptive to high-density housing, towers, a 46-story tower in Port Hueneme, by way of example, and the Wagon Wheel development in Oxnard was 20-story towers. And there's lots of development yet in Simi Valley and Camarillo and Moore Park. So we're going to have a very honest and frank discussion about acknowledging those large numbers of units to be built. The city of Thousand Oaks, back in the 70s, did absorb a very large number of housing units. We were building, John, 1,000 to 2,000 units per year. So at that point in our history, we were taking on a lot of housing. Now we're at the end of the development cycle for our community, and other cities in the beginning or the middle stages. So we're going to talk about that reality and have that reality reflected in the numbers, and I'm pretty confident we're going to get there.
Thank you. Additional questions of staff? Mrs. Bilder-Lapena.
Good evening, Mr. Prescott and Mr. Spector. It says in the slide presentation that, or in your staff report, that it was a VCOG subcommittee which came up with a new amount of numbers or amount of 4 housing units for Thousand Oaks. And in our recommendations as to how to address this problem, it says to have a letter written to SCAC from each VCOG member taking issue with the methodology used. I don't understand, if it was a VCOG subcommittee that came up with a revision, how would they be against that?
The letter written to SCAG was commenting on the overall methodology, including the allocation for the entire sub-region. The VCOG issue was just a sort of an internal, within Ventura County, a shot at trying to come up with an alternative way to distribute the number. They're kind of on a separate track.
State law mandates that the general plan housing elements be updated periodically. When was the last update? When was the last time we received the RENA numbers?
Well, it was for the time period of 1998 through 2005, and that housing element update, I believe, was approved in either 2000 or 2001.
How many units were recommended and how many units were actually built?
Well, I'm not sure off the top of my head how many were built, although we could probably estimate it closely. I think it was 4,300 approximately was the RENA number at that time.
And we actually built about 4,800 during that period.
So we did build more than what was mandated?
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible, if all else fails, to simply lobby in Sacramento for new legislation that would reduce the pressure on communities?
Well, I think the legislation that was adopted over the past several years is different rules now than we dealt with in our last housing element update, which occurred in 2000. The factors that can be considered in asking for a reduced number are much more stringent. The city's general plan, and this is the ironic part to me as a professional planner, that the state tells cities that they have to adopt general plans to guide their long-term physical development, and we adopted a general plan to guide our long-term physical development. And now the state is saying through the RENA process that we're going to give you some numbers, and whether or not you can accept that amount of housing and whether or not your general plan envisions or perceives that amount of housing as possible in the future is irrelevant. So I think they're really, it's kind of like mixed messages from the state. There is not the comprehensive kind of planning where all the factors are taken into account: housing, environmental, transportation, et cetera. It's really kind of single issue stuff that comes down, and it's tops down instead of bottoms up. And I think that's the problem. In the original RENA allocations that we got, the number for Thousand Oaks, and I think for reasons specified in the staff report, actually was something that was in line with our own local planning philosophies. And when I first looked at it, before I looked at the numbers for those cities, I said, wow, SCAG and the state are really looking at this bottoms up. And then I saw the numbers for the other cities, and I knew that something else was going on here. So I do think there's, just my own opinion as a planner, that the state, for whatever reasons, is not approaching it in a way that makes sense from a local governmental planning perspective. And the local governments are the ones that have to provide the services, that have to make sure that land uses are compatible and consistent with each other. I don't think it serves anybody to develop a large amount of housing in an area that's not designed to accommodate it. You create long-term problems in your community unless it's well done and well designed. And Thousand Oaks and many other cities have a good track records of developing affordable housing projects within their communities in areas that are conducive to residential development and in manners that fit with the community. So those are our kind of larger concerns. I think that the number that we eventually get, and right now we've got a number that's very workable. What we're trying to do now is work in a collegial way with the other affected cities in Ventura County to try to get numbers that as many people as possible can live with. And if we can do that, that's great. We always have the appeals process through SCAG if we wind up with a number. Or actually, VCOG would have to submit a number for Thousand Oaks that we didn't agree with, and then we would be telling SCAG not to adopt VCOG's number. That's kind of where we'd be.
Mr. Prescott, what would be the penalty or consequences if the city of Thousand Oaks were not to comply with these new mandates?
Well, I'll make some comments, and then I think the city attorney will make some other comments. But what the RANA process is, these are numbers, and you're looking now at just the total number of dwelling units. The next level is breaking that down into housing that's affordable to different income ranges, and it's not done directly. We just have to provide in our housing element update, which is due mid-2008, so the RANA is really the first step in that. You get your regional housing needs number, and you develop your housing element around that. Your housing element needs to show sites within the community that can be developed at densities sufficient to accommodate the low and very low and moderate income, very low and low income component of that. And the state has said through the legislation that de facto if you have land zoned for 20 units an acre or 30 units an acre, that qualifies. The housing element, unlike all the other parts of a city's general plan, has to be blessed by the state. No other part of the city's general plan has to be actually certified by the state. The state publishes guidelines for what a general plan should cover. But the housing element has to be submitted to the state and certified. So they will look at it. They will look at whether the housing element, look at our RANA number, look at whether we demonstrate in the housing element that we've got sufficient sites for those densities that are implied by the number, and then pass judgment on it. And if they certify our housing element, which they've done every time, then we're fine. And if they don't certify our housing element, the city attorney will tell you what happens.
Thank you. I would just imagine that the Housing and Community Development Department would really create problems that would conflict with environmental laws and all kinds of other state laws, perhaps, and increasing density.
I'm sorry, this is a very difficult area. It just shows the conflict between different interests the state has at this point. Yet, yes, we have environmental laws, a whole bunch of things, and I think Mr. Prescott eloquently talked about trying that the cities generally have the right through their general plans to outline how they're going to develop and what their cities are going to look like, and yet we have more and more harsher and harsher requirements when it comes to providing housing and our RANA numbers. And I personally, you asked the question earlier about do we need to go to the state? I think eventually that's what's going to happen, that somehow we have to come as a state to grips with local versus the state policy. And I think it's a very difficult one. There are things that we're going to look at and have to push is they're saying infrastructure. You can look at your issues of infrastructure and whether you can accommodate these numbers, and it's not quite clear what that really means. If you don't have capacity at your sewer plant, is there infrastructure issues? Well, then the answer may be, well, no, you can go build more capacity. So I think a lot of this stuff, as it gets more and more difficult for cities to accommodate these numbers, are going to play out more and more. You have litigation in other areas, in San Bernardino, in Riverside, and I think we're going to see more of that happening because in the past, cities pretty much, I think, were somewhat successful in showing they could accommodate the numbers. And as we said, there's no requirement that we build it, but there is a requirement that we have policies in place that accommodate the numbers. But I think it's getting more and more difficult for cities to show that they can even accommodate the numbers that are being given to us. And I really do see it as a struggle for competing interests and competing values. And a lot of it has to come down with the issue of affordable housing and how that's done. I think it's really difficult because the state does not consider to a great extent the numbers that we might have in place where we help agencies purchase places and rehabilitate them, and we don't get credit for those under the RANA numbers. It's very limited how you can get credit for rehabilitation under RANA. So there's a lot of pull there and diverse dichotomy going on.
Thank you, Ms. Silvano. Any additional questions of staff? Being none, it's a pleasure of the council. Mr. Fox?
I would move that we receive the report and direct the Ventura Council of Governments representative to advocate for rain allocation that reflects the city's planning and development constraints. Who is our VCOG rep, by the way?
I'm sorry.
Who is our VCOG rep?
We just have we've had a change, and Dr. Glancy is our new rep.
Okay, pressure's on for Tom.
All right. I apologize. I'm in error. If we take an action later on this evening, Dr. Glancy will be our representative. At the present time, Mrs. Irwin is our representative, but Mrs. Irwin, if we take an action later on, will no longer be our representative, and Dr. Glancy will be our representative if we take an action later on.
All right, and that's the motion.
Does that answer your question completely? Close the pleasure of the council. We've got it. We've got a motion. Any comments to the motion? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 10, redevelopment agency reports. We have none. Item 11, committee commission board reports. Item 11A, Cooperative Library System, Metropolitan Cooperative Library System Report. Two-member committee, Dr. Glancy, Mrs. Bill De La Pena. Which one of you wishes to speak to that?
I'll yield the floor.
Okay, Mrs. Bill De La Pena.
Thank you. Dr. Glancy and I interviewed applicants for the position on the System Advisory Board of the Metropolitan Cooperative Library System, and we recommend the appointment of Martha Van Huggins to the board. And I believe that Ms. Huggins may be updating the council every now and then whenever there are meetings regarding the library system and how it can improve, or whether other cities are getting any input from our library system to improve theirs. So with that, the motion would be, unless you would like to make a comment, the motion would be to appoint Ms. Huggins to the advisory board.
Motion is to approve the appointment. Dr. Glancy, do you have any additional comment?
I think Councilmember Bill De La Pena covered it quite adequately. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion. Any comments to the motion? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 11B, FY fiscal year 2006-2007 Community Enhancement Grant Award recommendations. Nancy Arrieta, Assistant Analyst. Please.
Good evening, Mayor Gillette, members of the City Council. I would like to introduce Debbie Barenbaum, Vice Chair of the Community Funding Review Committee. Debbie will present the report on the Community Enhancement Grant.
Welcome, Ms. Barenbaum. Please.
Thank you. The Community Funding Review Committee last met November 14th. We reviewed the Community Enhancement Fund grant applications. We had a total of $45,000 available. 16 applications were submitted for a total requested amount of $82,000. So we had double the requested amount almost than what we had to give out, but we did allocate the $45,000 to 14 qualified applicants. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? I have a series of statement cards that I'm sending out to the council right now to look at on this item, so I'm going to wait for just a minute until each council member's had a chance to see them. Scott, you want to pass this down? Thank you. It's a pleasure of the council. Dr. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would first like to compliment the committee for a tough job. You really put in the time, you come out very well. Thank you very much for your effort. I'd like to move staff recommendation approving the 14 community announcement grant awards totaling $45,000 and authorize the city manager to execute the appropriate agreements with grantees to effectuate the awards.
Thank you. A motion to approve the staff recommendation. Comments to the motion? We'll start with Mrs. Irwin.
I also want to thank the committee. It is a difficult job to have limited funds and to allocate them among all these worthy groups. And we did notice that you had a lot of compliments tonight, Ms. Arrieta, and I know that in the past there have been problems filling out applications, so it sounds like you've been able to overcome those issues, and the groups were very appreciative, and thank you to everybody that came out and spoke. This is one of those win-win situations. The city is beautified, and these community groups are able to earn some money, and that's always a difficult thing to do, and it's better than selling calendars door to door or whatever that might be. And I think it's also good to actually have the kids work instead of just giving the grant. I think it's really a great program. So I will support the motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Irwin. Ms. Bildel-Opinion.
Thank you. I actually had a quick question for staff. I may have missed it, but did you say how many applications came in and how many were approved? Yes, I'm sure. I knew I did.
There were 16 applications submitted and 14 were approved.
And I believe the number 14 is an improvement over the last allocation, which had, I believe, 10. So we were able to help 4 more organizations, which I think is wonderful. And I, too, will support the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Bildel-Opinion. Additional comments to the motion? There being none, I'd like to add my congratulations and appreciation to the effort that you put into this. This is a great help to the community, a phenomenal benefit to the community that we're able to do that. We're able to rely on your assistance to help us, so thank you very, very much. There being no additional comments, questions, please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Council issues and recommendations, follow-up reports on meetings and conferences. We have none. Interim appointment, item 12B, interim appointment of Dr. Glancy as the city's representative, Ventura County Council of Governments, VCOG. Report in the council packet. It's a relatively simple appointment. Dr. Glancy has agreed to serve the city in that appointment to VCOG. There are a number of things on the horizon with VCOG, not the least of which is merging some of its duties, or possibly all of them, with the Transportation Commission, trying to get a more cohesive representative body representing the 11 political subdivisions of the 10 cities in the county. So the RENA numbers right now are of particular importance to us, and I deeply appreciate your willingness to take that on, Dr. Glancy. Pleasure of the council. Mrs. Bildel-Opinion.
I'll move the recommendation to appoint Dr. Glancy as interim representative to VCOG.
Thank you. I have a motion. Comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Item 13, City Manager, Mr. Mitnick.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, by way of follow-up from a request from the public tonight, first I'd like to once again thank Mike LaPlante, our fire chief, and all the firefighters for their work on the Shaquille fire effort in the Moore Park area. Greatly appreciated. By way of comments from the public, just an individual made comments about the consent calendar and his perception of lack of council review and involvement and so on. Just as a reminder to the public, the vast majority of the consent items are printed for the council and for the public, and they can review them, and if there are questions, they can ask them as they do on normal or on any agenda item. By way of legislative issues, 2 things worth commenting on, one dealing with housing, one dealing with transportation. There was discussion of the RENA numbers. We are monitoring what's going on in Sacramento very closely right now. The next 2 to 3 months are critical in terms of the state's effort on the housing numbers, dealing with RENA and so on. There is a desire in Sacramento to tighten up on the numbers, and Sacramento is not very sympathetic of the coastal counties. So staff is monitoring that and will provide updates to the council. By way of transportation funding, the bonds that were approved recently at the state level do provide almost unparalleled opportunities for investment in Ventura County infrastructure projects, and the city is monitoring those. And I have shared with council in your packet recent communication with the Ventura County Transportation Commission. A number of council members have expressed concern over the delays in the 101-23 interchange project, and we are working very closely to get funding for that, and we're hopeful, based on input from the VCTC Executive Director, that that project may indeed go forward prior to the end of the 23 freeway widening project. So we'll keep a close eye on that. And also in response to council comments, we'll keep a close eye on the 23 freeway landscaping project or projects where the sound wall is going up. Lots of concern that they can be improved on how they look, and we're working on enhanced landscaping opportunities. More updates will be provided to council and to the public. By way of announcements for upcoming issues, the mayor did provide a State of the City address on November 28th, and that is being replayed over Channel 10, TOTV Channel 10, and there are 4 more replays, one scheduled for December 9th at 3 p.m., December 10th at 9 p.m., December 11th at 10 p.m., and December 12th at 4 p.m. The next council meeting will be next Tuesday, December 12th. That is what's referred to as the reorganization meeting, in which council is scheduled to ratify the election results from November and then select a new mayor and mayor pro tem, as well as make 2 seat dedications here in the chambers. The next meeting after that will not be until January. It will be January 9th, 2007. 3 public hearings worth mentioning. One dealing with the abandonment of a sliver of, I think it's Silas Avenue between Borchard and Cindy in Newbury Park. Second public hearing is the mobile home park moratorium extension. It's been nearly a year since that. And then the third public hearing will deal with the allowing grading prior to the recording of final maps. That's been to the Planning Commission. It's a code amendment. Now it'll come to council. So that is it by way of city manager follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. Item 14, closed sessions. We have none. Item 15, at this time we will adjourn to the next city council meeting, the city council reorganization meeting at 6:30 p.m. on December 12th, 2006. We are adjourned.